All right, we are recording and welcome for MELS 604 Clinical Coach Zoom session for February the 18th, which is on a Monday, and it has been a Monday all day long. I'm sure that it can for you as well. Just want to make sure everybody's doing okay. What I had on the agenda tonight was to talk about task 3 and task 4 of the CAP, and then answer any questions that you may have. Before we get started, though, are there any questions that's burning a hole in someone's mind that they'd like answered right off the bat?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to let you know I'm here. I'm going to turn my video off because I have dinner, so I don't want everyone to watch me eat. But I'm here.
Jessica, I certainly appreciate that, and I grabbed a handful of almonds and haven't had supper yet, so I appreciate you hiding the fact that you're eating supper, because that's going to make me hungry. So good. That was a good leadership competency, when to step away and hide the food. So good job. Okay, thanks for letting me know.
No problem.
Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay, great. Well, if they do pop up, then if you do have any questions that you'd like answered, use the chat box and type in and let me know you have a question, and then we'll review that and answer that. Well, in the schedule, like I said, tonight we're going to talk about CAP Task 3 and CAP Task 4. And it's really going to be a short conversation unless you guys have a lot of questions, because this is basically just the task 3 is that you're really putting some detailed information in front of the reader about the culture of your school. It's laid out for you in the different subheadings that you need to have in this task. And all of it, to some degree, maybe not to the detail that you would need to put it into this task, but to some degree, you've already documented this information in your other evidences. Vision and mission of your school, what's the school leadership like, teacher quality as measured by experience and certification. Excuse me just a moment. What's the parental involvement and support at your school? How is conflicts resolved? What's the conflict resolution process at your school? And also, what student achievement look like? So, in fact, you could go back and pull this information from your other evidences and use them in this. Now, when I say that, I don't mean just go in and copy from task 1 or from evidence 1, from the ABSL, from the APTL, from the OMA, and just paste it in there. You can do some of that. That's okay, but make sure it's deliberate in the fact that you're making your narrative flow and the content transition from one to the other. Just a copy and a paste here and a copy and a paste there and being done really doesn't show the continuity that I'd like to see in a task. And so it's okay that you pull that information from your evidences. It's okay that you put it into task 3, but just make sure that it doesn't look like it's been copied and pasted for the whole document. So just wanted to kind of throw that little piece of advice in there, because I have seen that happen before, to where it just gets pulled in and pasted, pulled in, even to the extent that the font is different. So just make sure that you're mindful of that. Vision and mission, what's the vision of the school? What's the mission? Not just kind of telling that information, but what is the, I know every school has their vision statement, has their mission statement, but what is the vision of the school? What is the mission of the school? Describe the culture. Describe the culture of that school in relationship to the vision statement and to the mission statement. School leadership, yeah, there may be a principal, there may be two assistant principals, there just may be a principal by themselves, but in school leadership, you may even want to describe the school leadership team, or the school improvement team, that who are some teacher leaders in the school that help. Leadership's not just the principal. It could be the instructional specialist if you have an instructional specialist at your school. So what does that leadership, what does that guiding force look like in your school, and how do they interact with each other? Teacher quality by experience and certification. Your HR department can get that information for you, or you may just be able to get it from the principal or the school secretary. But how many beginning teachers do you have in the building? How many 20 years plus teachers? How many 10 to 20 plus teachers? Who has their national board certification? Who has their master's? Who has their doctorate in the building? So that just kind of go into detail of some of those things that are lying underneath the surface that has an effect on the culture of your school. Parental involvement and support. Are there parent volunteers that come into the school? Are there lunch buddies that come into the school? What's your parental involvement? It's parental and family and parental engagement policy. What does that look like at your school? And how does that function? How is that policy used to ensure that the parents feel welcoming and engaged and invited in the building? And how do they support your school in the different ways that they do so? Drawing attention to that parental involvement policy, especially if you ever end up being the principal of a Title I school, is very important, because you have to report out on that every year when you do your comprehensive needs assessment. And then when DPI comes to monitor your district, they'll want to see the parental involvement policies of each school, and they'll want to see how those policies are used at the school. So it's important that you're aware of what that is and what that looks like, and how that guides the school in parent and family engagement. Conflict resolution, not just, if two teachers are arguing with each other and the principal has to step in and kind of mediate that, but what about in the leader, like as you did with your PLC team? What's the process when in a faculty meeting somebody brings up an opposing opinion, or maybe not an opposing, but a opinion opposite of what's being discussed? How disagreements are resolved, and how is, on the school leadership team or school improvement team, when you go through and you talk about different evidence-based practices that could be considered, how does those disagreements or those opposing views, how do they get resolved? Is there a process for that? And you may want to get some of this by sitting down and having an interview with your principal, and ask them some of the questions about the culture and what their thoughts are on that. Student achievement. What's that look like? You could certainly pull in the information that you've had in the past on the data analysis, and what's the NC report, school report card, that information that you've used in the past. In those regards, you can, and all of this, you could still pull in some information from the teacher working condition survey that you've been working with as well. So it's just a description and detail of the culture of your school within these areas. And then if you'll notice at the bottom, recommendations for activities, programs to improve the school culture are aligned with description of the current context. So as you go through and you describe all of this information, once again, just like you've done many times in the past, is look for gaps. Look for things that could be improved upon. Have that conversation with your principal and draw on their expertise and their knowledge and their what they see in the school that could be some things that they may already be working on or intend on working on. And then in the accomplished, let me grab hold of here. In the accomplished, if you want to go for the accomplished column rather than the proficient, this can all be done solo. But if you want to go for the accomplished column, then you may want to get some of those standby team members that you've used up to this point, share that information with them and get their thoughts on it as well, especially for the recommendations part. I think that's a good practice anyway. It's not necessary for the proficient, but I think anytime that you can lead a team and continue to facilitate that, it just continues to hone your leadership competencies. Any questions on task 3? All right. Task 4 is basically just what you've done in the past. It's just a reflection on the leadership competencies that you utilized to accomplish the CAP. So you go through and read through this carefully, and you basically, you reflect on the parameters that were identified in 1 and 2, using a graphic organizational school to display the school's progress towards the identified goals and demonstrate the leadership between these goals and step 2 improvement. So it's basically you reflect on all of this information and you come up with a graphic organizational chart based on everything that you've seen and the way to display the progress towards the school's goals and everything. So basically a flow chart, or my mind just went blank, a PERT chart would suffice too, but just about, you know, developing that graphic representation of what you've seen and how your school is going to progress towards those goals. Now it talks about here in the description, the graphic organizational chart should also meet these following criteria. So make sure that you read through that as well. And that's basically it. You just putting it all into a graphic. One thing that I do want to bring up before I forget it, in your competency folio, and we'll be talking about task stream after we're going to go on through the SIP and be talking about task stream, but in the past, and I think I may have already addressed this with this group. Like I said, I've got about 4 groups right now. It's hard to remember who I said what to. But in your competency folio, this came down from leadership pretty plainly over the last several weeks. Your competency folio, you do not have to write any type of narrative or put any type of narrative in there. That's where you just upload your artifacts. You can put a sentence of explanation if you feel like you need to, but you don't have to write the narrative at one time. There was supposed to be some narrative to go along with those artifacts to kind of explain what they were. But the last accreditation visit from CAPE, all they want to see is just artifacts. Any narrative, any writing, any explanation of your competencies, all go into your competency analysis. We'll talk about that later on as we progress through the semester a little bit more. But I just wanted to be sure that I mentioned that to you while it was on my mind, because we had another conversation about that this week in the Zoom faculty meeting with all the regular professors and the associate professors and the adjuncts. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it to you. So if there's any questions on that, please let me know. Do you have any questions on anything that we had a conversation about tonight? Not surprised. You guys have been through this. You know the routine, you know the process, and you're doing a great job. So, and once again, as you progress into 605, you know, it's kind of like I work my way out of a job with this MELS programs. Like feel like 601. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of answers. You know, getting you kind of oriented to the process. But then as you move through it, you kind of get a handle on what's going on, and so I'm needed less and less. But as always, if you do have any questions or if you need to speak to me about anything, just contact me and we'll work through it. Unless there is anything else, I am going to meet with going to stay online. I'm going to stop the recording and stay online and meet with one candidate, and the rest of you can sign off. I hope you have a great evening. God bless you. Stay safe. I hope your family stays safe and are blessed. So before we cut out, does anybody have any comments or questions? Just wanted to check one more time. Okay, great. I'm going to stop the recording. I'll, of course, post the recording as I always and put it in the video library. You guys have a great evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you.